Our first speaker today is going to be Robert Ostergaard, who is the brother of Lori Ostergaard and is the director of digital communications for Montclair State University in Montclair, New Jersey. He leads the team that's responsible for the university's content and marketing strategies on the web and in social media. Prior to joining Montclair State, Robert was the vice president of cross-platform creative strategy for Nick Jr., Nickelodeon's preschool brand. While at Nickelodeon, Robert led the digital team, developed content strategy for the Nick Jr. website and apps, and also oversaw marketing campaigns across web, social media, and television. He started his career as a magazine editor for regional and national magazines. Wave, Robert. Thank you. Next we have Nicole B. Lockhart, one of our alumni. She is a 28-year-old Detroit native and 2014 graduate of Oakland University. Currently, Nicole practices as a business litigation attorney at Mantees Honigman, I hope I'm saying that right, PC. She is now handling a federal California-based class action lawsuit. Nicole's passion for the law stems from strong familial roots in the heart of Detroit with federal judge Damon J. Keith, who desegregated Pontiac public school system in 1970 as her great uncle. Staying true to the family legacy, Nicole attended Wayne State University Law School, where the Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights is located. Before law school, Nicole graduated from Oakland University, receiving a BA with a concentration in persuasive writing and rhetoric. While at OU, Nicole served as peer mentor with the Center for Multicultural Initiatives, a member of the Student Program Board, and maintained a radio show on OU's WXOU. Wave, Nicole.
Hi.
And finally, we have Dr. Tammy Rice Bailey, Associate Professor of Technical Communication and User Experience at the Milwaukee School of Engineering, where she is the coordinator of the Technical Communication minor. She earned her PhD in professional writing from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Prior to her academic career, she managed corporate documentation and training for global software, financial, and retail corporations. She's worked for McDonald's Corporation, Install Shield Software, Kemper Financial, and consulted for PricewaterhouseCoopers. Her work's been published in Technical Communication Quarterly, Technical Communication, Technical Writing and Communication, and elsewhere. Wave, Tammy. Thank you. All right, so without any further ado, we're going to turn this over to our first speaker, Robert Ostergaard. You have the floor.
Oh, hello. Oh, hello. Thank you. And thank you so much for having me here. I'm so delighted to be here and so pleased that you invited me. I'm also glad that you're videotaping this because I tend to speak really fast and I'm hoping that people will be able to follow along. I thought I would just jump in and tell you a bit more about who I am and my background and hopefully give you some sense of how rhetoric and writing and storytelling have practical applications for me and for my career. I started my career as a magazine editor. I was actually hired to be an assistant to a publisher at a regional magazine. And one of the perks of the job was I got to do some writing and editing. I was an English major in college. I love writing, I love reading. But I always tell people that I'm much better at criticizing than I am at creating. And so being an editor was ideal for me. I'm much better able to help writers craft a story than I am to actually create a story myself. And I spent many years working at magazines, working with writers to craft stories. And that was a terrific, fulfilling job. After magazines, I went to Nickelodeon, where I worked in digital. And I got that job because they were looking for an editor, someone who could distill all of this information, academic sort of information and information on curriculum, distill it down to an audience of parents on the medium of digital websites. And they needed someone who was able to translate all of this information for this audience in a new platform, a new medium. And so I was able to do that. Fortunately for me, the background and abilities that I developed in storytelling and sort of identifying an audience, identifying their values, their needs, identifying how to reach that audience and speak to that audience and how to create a persuasive argument and reach them and compel action and compel some sort of an outcome. Those are skills that translate. And so I was able to translate those outside of just editing parenting articles. What they needed was someone who could also work with, and I was fortunate to be able to do this, to work with game developers, game designers, web developers, designers, videographers, people who are telling stories in other mediums to different audiences. And storytelling is important no matter what the medium is. And telling a story in a digital format in written form is very different than telling a story in a game. Telling a story about information or conveying information to a parent on a website is very different than engaging a child in a story within a game. Our games at Nickelodeon, I worked on the preschool shows, and our games were for preschoolers. They don't read. So how do you convey a story to a preschooler when they don't read? You can't use written text. So I had an opportunity to write scripts for games and for videos. And for games, how much copy or voiceover scripting would you need to tell the story to the preschooler, to keep them engaged, and also to give them the instruction that they needed to be able to play that game, and how to write just enough copy to help them play that game without getting in the way of their enjoyment. And all of those are sorts of skills that are writing skills, right? And so that was a fantastic opportunity for me to sort of broaden my writing scope and my skills out into new platforms and new mediums. The other thing I got to do at Nickelodeon was work on air and digital campaigns. You know, every year at Nickelodeon, or every month at Nickelodeon, there's one big event and multiple smaller events on television. So it's December coming up, it's Dora's Christmas Extravaganza, and we need a campaign around that. And we need to come up with a campaign that works not just on our television network for that particular medium, television, and for that particular audience of preschoolers. How do we speak to preschoolers on television about this event and tell the story of the event that gets them to want to tune in? But we also need to come up with a campaign that would work in digital. How do we get preschoolers interested in, engaged in, and invested in this event in digital spaces, in digital content? And also, how do we get their parents involved and engaged on social platforms? So for each of these campaigns, we had 3 different platforms: television, website, and social. And we had 2 different audiences: preschoolers and their parents. We had to learn, how do you speak to each of these? How do you identify each of those audiences? How do you identify what's important to each of those audiences? And what is the information you need to convey to them in a way that is going to compel action? How do you persuade them to engage in the content and tune in? And that was a really big part of my job. And my last job at Nickelodeon was the vice president of cross-platform creative strategy. And essentially all the campaigns that we did, it was my job to make sure that we were telling the same story for each of these events across all of our platforms, whether they were digital, on air, social, in press, wherever it might be. We were telling the same story, but we were telling it to different audiences in different platforms. And we were taking best advantage of each of those platforms and speaking to each of those audiences in a way that was appropriate, and in a way that was persuasive, and a way that would compel action and outcomes that we wanted. So that was my job. Really, marketing is a really big part of what I've been doing in the past few years. But that's external sort of storytelling, I like to say. The external storytelling is sort of the marketing that I do. Internal storytelling is something that is incredibly important, and something that I wish everyone in any field or any career understood and could do. And I think people who study writing and study rhetoric and persuasion and storytelling, I think the study of that helps you with internal storytelling. And what I mean by that is, for example, at the end of every Nickelodeon campaign, we would pull together all the metrics. How did it perform? What were our ratings? How did we perform for particular demographics? How did we perform in web? What was our engagement rates? We would have all of this information, but you can't just share that information in an Excel document, right? You have an audience, and it's an internal audience of your leadership. You need to be able to tell a success story for the things that you've done internally. How did you perform? How did your team perform? And who your audience is, in this case, is your leadership. And you want to convince them that what you did was a success, and what you did added to the success of the larger department, the division, the organization. That's internal storytelling. It's incredibly important. And knowing how to tell a story internally is important in any career that you go into. And I do this also in my new job at Montclair State. You know, I manage the website and social, and we have different priorities and goals every week, every month. And I gather in tons of metrics from Google Analytics and from social platforms and software. I gather in tons of information, and I have to tell the story of how did we perform. But I can't just send the Excel document. I have to be able to distill all that information down and tell my internal audience, who's usually my boss and my boss's boss and the president of the university, how do we perform? How did this campaign perform? How did the web perform? How did social perform? And I have massive amounts of information, and I have to distill it down to sometimes 4 or 5 bullet points. And I have to be able to choose which of those 4 or 5 bullet points based not on the things that I think are important or the things that I'm particularly proud of, but things that I know answer on goals as set by our leadership, by my audience. So I have to sort of tell the story based on my internal audience of my leadership to show them the success that we've had. This is something that everybody in every career, every field, I think will experience in their lives, because no matter what you go into, you're probably at some point in your life going to have to, or in your career, you're going to have to write like an end of year self-evaluation. And I just did mine, so it's fresh in mind. And when you write your self-evaluation, you have to compile all the information about your successes for the entire year. And you have to compress that down to tell your audience, who's usually your boss, why you were successful. When you write your self-evaluation, you don't want to just talk about the things that you're especially proud of that you were successful at. You have to tell the story of what the success was within your department or yourself that relates to the goals that were established by your leadership. And that way you show value, the value that you're bringing internally to your leadership. So a lot of my job has been sort of external storytelling marketing, but a lot of my success, I think, is due to internal storytelling, which is incredibly important for whatever career you go into. And if you're studying writing and you're majoring in it, and there are so many different options for you in careers, because storytellers are needed in things like video and content development and augmented reality and game development. All of these different careers, they need storytellers, right? But any career that you end up going into, you will use the writing, you will use the rhetoric, you will need storytelling ability, you will need to be able to craft a message, get that message across to your audience and persuade them and to compel an outcome or compel an action. So, all right, that's my entire spiel. And I hope that made sense.
Thank you.
Okay, so I am here to talk about rhetoric and the law. Like my introduction said, I was a rhetoric and writing major in OU. I started in 2010 through 2014. Initially, I was a bio major, and that was because I was just being stubborn and I didn't want to do what my cousins were doing. But eventually, after so many bio labs and smelling formaldehyde every Saturday, I came to my senses and I chose the superior major. And that was writing and rhetoric. The reason why I chose that, we can go to the next slide. The reason why I chose that was advice of my cousin who's a judge. Of course, you know, I was thinking, oh, well, let me go to political science because that's what all lawyers do. I don't know anything about politics really, truly to this day, besides, you know, the Schoolhouse Rock videos. So when he said that choosing rhetoric as a major, I was a bit confused, but when I realized in practice is the importance of rhetoric, because only 2% of cases really go to trial. So what do we do in the meantime? What do lawyers do in the meantime? How do we prove our point? And we prove our points through pleadings, which is basically a writing to the court asking them to take your side. We can go to the next slide. So yes, 90% of my time is spent drafting motions and conducting research, and that's tons of paper. One motion can be upwards of 600 pages. And that's because there's 2 sides most of the time. There could be 3 or 4 sides too. You file an initial motion, which is 25 pages in Michigan, and then you file a response, which is 25 pages as well. And then I can file a response to a response and then a reply and so on. So you see how there's an insurmountable amount of pages that a judge would have to read. And in no fault, exhibits alone can be voluminous medical records. For example, someone gets into the accident and they sue to get personal protection benefits. We would attach emergency room records, ambulance records, police reports, all of that stuff. And those pages can get so voluminous. So this is where rhetoric comes in, because a judge is like you and me. We have more work than we have time for. So a judge is not going to read every single page that you submit. And like in life, no one really cares about your issue as much as you do. So you have to put it up front. It's a certain method we call, it's an IRAC method. It's not the country. IRAC it stands for issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. So we have our own a method of persuading the judge quickly and upfront. And so I'm going to give you guys a few examples of how I use rhetoric in my legal practice. We can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Persuasive rhetoric and practice, or beyond a reasonable doubt. In law, we have our own measure of persuasion, and that is beyond a reasonable doubt. A lot of people hear that on TV. But what that really is that is our standard of legal proof required to affirm or deny a conviction. So a prosecutor must prove that there is no other reasonable explanation flowing from the evidence presented, logos, logic. So in short, we don't prove truth in court. We prove doubt. And if truth mattered, really, we wouldn't need courts, because you can say, well, I'm telling the truth. No, you have to go in and you have to have someone advocate on your behalf and press this persuasion measurement of a reasonable doubt. So how do we prove our points in court? A lot of the times we use Aristotle's modes of persuasion. We can go to the next slide. So those are, of course, you guys know by now, ethos, pathos, and logos. These classical rhetorical principles are used in legal discourse every single day. Ethos, of course, is the appeal to credibility. Pathos, appeal to emotion. Logos, appeal to logic. I'll go to the next slide. And as a lawyer, of course, I'm going to give you guys a hypothetical. I'm going to put you guys to work. So take some time and read this hypothetical. And this is a hypothetical that I would use in my practice as a insurance defense attorney for State Farm. So I'll read it out loud with you guys if you have time. A man is hit by a car, this man right here, and he gets a lawyer. In his motion, he asks the court to award him $100,000 in personal protection benefits. He submits this photo as an exhibit to his claim, and they cite the following Michigan statute. It's the no-fault statute, basically saying insurer is liable to pay all benefits arising from accidental injury from a car accident. So you guys can be the judge and type in the comment bar. I'll be watching. So based on this picture and the law, the black and white law, the hypo, you guys type 1 if the plaintiff should be awarded PIP benefits, type 2 if you think otherwise. And for the sake of time, I will move forward so we can go to the next slide. Okay, while you guys process that. And so what if is what ethos really is. So as a defense attorney for State Farm, what I would do, what would your opinion change if I discredited the plaintiff's credibility? So for example, would your opinion change if, for example, I said, I showed surveillance saying John Doe broke his car windows the night of the crash, and, you know, the hit and run car that was on the police report, John Doe ended up getting into the car and going to Greektown Casino to celebrate his birthday party that night. And then later posting a music video to YouTube using funds from his monthly insurance payouts because he said he could not work. And if I showed that to a jury or a judge, how has the plaintiff's ethos been affected? his credibility is significantly lowered. And I was part of a special investigations unit with State Farm. And what we did was we protected not only the people of Michigan from increased rates due to these fraudulent accidents, but we would come in and use ethos every day to discredit the witness when situations call for it. Not every accident is fake, so I don't want you guys to think that. So we can go next to the next slide. And rule number one, as a defense attorney, you want to discredit the witness. And this rhetorical strategy, like I said, is used on a daily basis in every case when you're trying to persuade a judge or a jury to take your side. If someone's coming, if the plaintiff from our hypothetical John Doe were to come to you now and say, no, believe me, I still am hurt, you're less likely to believe him because of the rhetorical strategies employed by lawyers every single day. And we can go to the next slide. I'm going to give a bigger example of how rhetoric and the law can affect the entire world. Because of confidentiality and things of that sort, I can't go into the specifics of every case. So if this isn't clear, I'm just going to give you an example of ethos and the law on the larger scale. So this decision, the Dred Scott opinion, was opinion from the Supreme Court of the United States in 1857. And this case, which, opinions from the Supreme Court hold the weight of law. And so in this opinion, they persuaded the nation that we, the people, did not include Black people. A quick reference quote right here, it says, the Supreme Court ruled that Black men, whether free or enslaved, had no rights to which a white man was bound to respect. Now, this is coming from the Supreme Court of the United States of America. Basically, the background of this case was Dred Scott he was freed from slavery. He went up north and he attempted to get money and go back and buy his family, and he was recaptured and became a slave again. He filed suit to reclaim his freedom. And in the opinion, the court said, you don't have the right to come before the court because you're not really a person under we the people as the Constitution defined. You were more of commerce or property. And so the weight of this opinion was the law from there on out until the 13th Amendment. And so the power of persuasion in law is the most powerful because it can literally be the difference between freedom and slavery or life or death. And so we can go to the next slide. And so I want to show you guys how ethos was exemplified in the Dred Scott opinion. So ethos, again, is the credibility that you have behind you persuading your point. So this opinion was issued by the highest court in the nation, the Supreme Court. It was written by the highest ranked judge, Chief Justice Taney at the time on the Supreme Court. And they were interpreting the most important document in the nation, which is the Constitution. And again, this decision held the force of law. And just to explore more how ethos is so powerful, Justice Taney, just a little background, he was a Southern aristocrat and he was a super supporter of slavery. And there was a dissent written. A dissent is another justice on the Supreme Court who disagrees with the majority opinion. Then the majority opinion is the opinion that becomes law. And Judge Taney's ethos was so powerful that the dissenter did not even want to publish his opinion. It was actually leaked, and I'm not sure how something gets leaked back in 1857, but it was leaked, and needless to say that this justice quit his job shortly after it was leaked and returned to private practice. Now that's just the power of ethos and how it holds the effect on the nation. And we can go to the next slide. Logos, I use this a lot as well, another of Aristotle's points. Logos is an appeal to logic. Oh, we can go to the next slide, I'm sorry. An appeal to logic. So I use this every day. Identifications of the opposing counsel's fallacies or their illogical arguments really helps boost the credibility of really helps boost the credibility of your point, and it helps boost the credibility of your judge, of your point to the judge. So if you can't identify logical fallacies in the opposing counsel's argument, then you're going to be subject to a lot of unnecessary attacks, and you'll be like labeled a pushover, and you won't be able to vouch for your client as they should be. So, because you have to remember that law, again, isn't about truth, it's about doubt. So when money is on the line, a lot of some attorneys will say anything, and the ability to be able to identify the illogical reasoning in opposing counsel's argument is in itself boosting your credibility. Because again, we'll go back to the John Doe and the hypothetical. How likely are you to believe someone who's been blatantly proven false? You know, but we can go to the next slide. Yes, so identifying fallacies in real law situations. Now, this is not a political spiel, so nonpartisan, but it's just an example of how fallacies are interpreted in real life legal situations. So here we have the president of the United States, who is supposed to have a ethical, high ethos, you know, attacking Michigan governor, calling her Governor Half Whitmer, instead of addressing his actual views of her deficiencies in handling the coronavirus. So, you know, what fallacies can you identify in his tweets? You know, how does this affect his ethos? How does this affect his credibility? How does this affect his logic? You guys say this is an ad hominem fallacy. He's attacking the person and not the argument. Do you say, oh, his argument must be weak, you know, because he attacked her instead of actually giving logical points? And it's a rhetorical question, all pun intended. And so I want to end my presentation by saying law isn't about the truth. So we can go to the next slide, sorry. It isn't about truth, it's about proof. And it's the persuasive rhetoric that's the catalyst behind the results that we see that can affect everyday life. So rhetoric in law is the most useful tool you can use, and I use it every single day, whether I'm, you know, relaying a bad result to a client, say using some emotional appeal, saying, you know, I'm sorry this happened, or actually initial litigation conferences when a client will call and say, hey, I have this issue, and they're really upset. So, because when you call a lawyer, you're not in the best state. So what you do is you appeal to compassion. Say, you know, I'm sorry this happened, but here's how we're going to help you out. We're going to take A, B, C, D steps, you know. Or if you use it to opposing counsel when you're negotiating a settlement, for example, you'll use ethos. Say, hey, I know what you're trying to do, but if you bring this to this judge, he has a history of denying this motion, this type of motion. So you might not want to bring that up. So we should, you know, and then you use that in your negotiation tactics every single day. And I just want to end and thank the entire writing department, and specifically Professor Giberson, because he did write my recommendation letter to law school, and now, you know, it's going full circle. So I'm definitely happy to be here today, and this department has single-handedly launched, you know, my career in the law. So thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
Hello. Okay. So I'm actually going to start with a question in chat, and the question is for students. So if you could, excuse me, if you could in the chat type a number between 1 and 10, telling me how confident you are that your ideal job is going to be ready for you when you get out of school. So go ahead. If you're confident, give it a 10. If you're not confident at all, give it a 1. If you're somewhere in between, give it a number in between. Okay, I got a lot of, okay, some really good numbers here. Okay, yeah, all right. 6s, okay, then I've got some 3s and some 4s. All right, well, I want to congratulate you for, you know, for being close to getting your degree. And I wanted to tell you that your degree is going to really help you out there. Your confidence levels vary, but what I think is important and what I'd like to point out is how you're going to bridge that degree into that ideal job, especially if that ideal job isn't quite there when you're ready for it. So my career pre coming to academia, I spent 25 years in the I would say corporate America, and I've had roles that started from editor to technical writer to instructional designer, project manager, people manager, and I worked for a number of Fortune 500 companies. And today, what I want to do really quickly is share 3 quick lessons that I've learned from all 3 of these roles, which, by the way, not all 3 of these roles, I'm sorry, from all of these roles. And all of my jobs have included writing and rhetoric. Not all have included digital format or digital media, but writing and rhetoric have been instrumental to my career. So let me just start with my first lesson, which is to choose relevant work and turn it into something even more relevant. When I graduated in 1988, there were no jobs. There were no jobs in my field. And so I looked hard to just find any job in writing. And I found one for a really small company doing copy editing. So a very small, like 5-person company. And I was basically an editorial person. Not really what I wanted to do and not very high paying. I was making $7 an hour. But what I did is I was able to get into that job and turn it into something that I could use to springboard into the next job. So for instance, I convinced my manager or my boss, hey, could I design a brochure that tells people what radon actually is? So it was a radon mitigation company. And so that became something that I then used. That brochure became something that I used in my next job interview. So if that first job isn't perfect, that's okay. If you get something that's related, that's great. The second lesson is to keep learning. And moving from editing to technical writing really showed me the importance of this, because as a technical writer, not only did I have to learn the software that we use to document products, but I had to learn, since I worked in the software industry, I had to learn proprietary software applications that were being developed and sold to clients. So a lot of learning was involved here. And my good working relationships with the subject matter experts was not so much because I was a good writer, but it was because I was able to show them that I was interested in learning. So this is a lesson that I've learned over and over. One of my jobs at Platinum Technology, which was a software development company, we were moving from mainframe, which is the big old computers, to client server software. And the folks, the writers who were excited to get on board and learn this new networking software were the ones who were picked up by Apple, IBM, and Microsoft. So that's because of they wanted to learn more. So my third and final lesson, I know I'm going quickly, but I'm trying to catch us up a little bit. The third and final lesson I'd like to share is to network. And early in my career, I thought the best way to be successful was to keep my nose to the grindstone, much like I had done in college, right? So I'm going to work hard. I'm going to be really good designer, good writer, and I'm going to be rewarded for that. Well, what I found out, however, was that hard work alone does not make you successful in the business world. One element that is far more important are your relationships. So in the early days when my bosses or coworkers would be making small talk, I would just like, I'm just going to do my work. But I'll tell you what, I learned the importance of networking the hard way when one of the companies that I was working for went through a reorganization. And I was one of 4 instructional designers whose job was on the line. At the end of the day, the boss did not retain the best writer. The boss did not retain the most creative designer. The boss retained the person who had lunch with her once a week. And so I'm not saying you need to schmooze and suck up to the boss. That's not my message. But I am saying that relationships do matter. And just a final thought on networking. From 2008 to 2013, I ran my own consulting business, and I obtained 100% of my clients through other jobs I had had or through social and professional networks that I was a part of. So networking is just, I can't understate the value of it. So there you have it. My 3 in 3 minutes, three quick lessons I learned how to make your work relevant, make it more relevant, keep learning and networking. And those are my advice from the field. Thank you.
There's a question which I can answer, which was from Jennifer Kuhn, was how does data tell a story? Yeah, data definitely tells a story if you know what you're looking for. So for example, on our websites for Montclair State University, my team puts up a new large image, a promotional unit. We call it a hero. Every website has a big image at the top that you might want to click on. It's an article or something, right? So we review that every week to see, we leave it up for a solid week so we get a solid set of data and we can compare week to week. And every week I look to see what was the click-through rate for that. And that tells me a variety of things. And if for one thing, that recently we realized it's telling us not only what kind of content people on our website want to engage with, it's also telling us about who our audience is. And so, for example, we had a promotion up on our homepage and it got a lot more clicks than the previous week. And we were wondering, well, why is that? And we dug into it and we realized, based on other metrics that we looked at on our website, we had a lot more prospective students during that week who were coming to our website. And so the story from that we took out of that is, oh, more prospective students are coming to our site at this particular moment in time. And we want in the future to remember that at this moment in time, our audience is going to be prospective students, not faculty, not staff, not enrolled students, it's prospective students. And we need to know, be prepared to tell the story to them. So what we took out of that information was sort of the story of what is happening on our site and who our audience is and who we should be speaking to. I kind of hope that answers the question.
Can I answer a question from Lauren? If that's fine. Oh, okay. Is becoming an expert in one skill more valuable than having some knowledge about many skills? I love that question because it really depends on the type of job you want and the type of career you want. There are some people who become very deep subject matter experts in certain areas, and they will not necessarily rise to the level of vice president or president of the organization, but they will be valued for their deep technical knowledge. There are other people who maybe they want to try out different types of jobs, or they want to go on a management track. In those cases, it really does help to have maybe a lesser knowledge on a greater number of topics.
I will try and answer the question about gaining professional opportunities at big corporations. So internships obviously is one way to start, but another way, I think, getting back to something that Tammy Rice-Bailey just said, was networking is incredibly important. I started out in regional magazines, and one magazine, very small magazine I was working for, shut down. And the day it shut down, I got a call from a writer who I had been friendly with and worked with a lot. And she said, by the way, I just submitted your name to work in this really big national magazine. I hope that that's okay. And I said, yeah, it's great, because I'm literally out of a job 5 minutes ago. And that's how I got a job at a much larger company. It was through networking. And I will also say that networking and meeting people and joining organizations, and those are really great ways to sort of elevate your profile and get your name out there. And if you start networking over time, you will build those connections at bigger and bigger places. So that is one way to do it.
Yeah, and piggybacking off of that, I would say your professors, they're your first point of contact. You know, they're experts in this field. They know the people that, can help you. And so I would say go to those office hours. A lot of people, well, COVID, but I'm sure you guys have virtual office hours. A lot of people just see that on the syllabus and quickly bypass it. But I would definitely say build your relationships with your professors, get to know them. For example, Professor Giverson, like I said, he helped launch my career by writing a recommendation letter on my behalf, and off the subject, not in necessarily law school, one of my best friends, she interned for Alexander Wang in fashion, and now she's a editorial fashion magazine writer, or I'm not sure if I'm saying the right things, but basically internships really do help you out. And it shows people your seriousness. People are only going to take you as serious as you take yourself. So if you're willing to risk, okay, well, I'm not going to get paid right away. No one does right away. You're not going to be like super famous or super successful right away. It's always steps. It's always a process. And I would just say, trust the process and just keep working hard. Every success will come, just focus and hone in on your craft.
A couple of students were asking about failure. Do you guys have thoughts on that? What are some strategies you've used to recover from failure, or maybe a time when you didn't succeed in the way you'd hoped?
Yeah, I could address that. I like the way that the one question is phrased too about managing self-doubt. So I think those two are pretty closely related, right? I think a lot of that is that the old saying, fake it till you make it, is really a very, I think very wise, right? Because we're going to doubt what we're doing the first few times, or maybe even we do it a lot of times. I mean, I've been teaching for many years and I still have moments of panic before certain classes. And again, you want to exude a type of confidence, but a humility, right? And that is going to like, you can fake it, right, until you eventually you assume that, and that becomes who you are. And the other piece of that then would be that it's pretty typical to have like imposter syndrome, and the more successes that we gather, the better we're going to feel about ourselves, and we're probably going to feel it's going to help us achieve what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I would add to that too, because I think that the self-doubt question in particular really strikes a chord for me, because I think my whole career I've had imposter syndrome, you do sort of fake it, and over time it's confidence, but it's not necessarily real confidence. You're exuding a confidence that comes from knowledge that, yeah, I faced a lot of things in the past and I overcame them, and I bet I could probably overcome this one. And I'm just going to let people think or make people think that, yeah, I can overcome this too. But self-doubt is something that I'm not sure you ever overcome self-doubt, but you overcome the effects of self-doubt and you get better and better at sort of covering for it. And that's okay. And that actually is, in a weird way, it's almost empowering. There was this great, I'm showing my age here, but there was this great TikTok recently of someone who was it was introverts as journalists. And it's a TikTok of a woman who's got to call someone up and interview. And as the phone is ringing, she's like crying, please don't answer, please don't answer, please don't answer, please don't answer. And then they answer and she has to pretend to be a successful journalist. And literally, I'm an adult, I'm like 50 years old, and I've been in journalism for 30 something years. I literally still do that every time I have to call and interview someone. I'm in tears wondering, thinking, please don't answer the phone. And then they do, and I have to act professional. And actually it turns out really well. And that feels good. And then when you hang up the phone, you're like, no, that was really good, a lot better than I thought. And so, I don't know, you just have to sort of keep going.
And am I on mute? Okay, no. And going off of that, yeah, failure is just going to be a part of the process. You just have to stop looking at it as being scared, because yes, I am a millennial and I despise talking on the phone. I despise talking in public in general, and I'm super, super shy. But what helps me is, you have to fail forward sometimes, and you do fake it until you make it. And so one of my favorite artists, Beyonce, she has an alter ego. And if you hear her in interviews, she'll say, I'm really actually a super shy person, but, it's like a facade you turn on. Yeah, fake it till you make it. And, I'm 28 and I'm in meetings at this commercial litigation firm. I'm in meetings with these huge executives and all this stuff. And I barely even know, that the water bill is not the same as, a Comcast bill. I'm like, hey, why is my water bill, more this month than last month? It's not a strict contract. I'm still learning life. So, you fake it till you make it. You will fail, and just stop being afraid of it. Let it launch you and embrace everything, because it's going to be a part of your story.
Maybe the panelists could address, I think it was Kasha that asked a question specifically related to writing. What kind of writing is valued in the disciplines or the careers that you are representing here? Or what are the traits of writing that are most valued?
I can take a stab at that. I would say that in general, and this maybe just shows my bias, but um, concise writing, writing that gets to the point. Um, you know, I always tell my students, technical writing should not be suspenseful, right? We should be able to understand, like, an executive summary is a nice example of, and I believe that Nicole was talking about something similar, that she has to prepare for judges, right? The judge only has to look at, I'm assuming, just this one page so that they can kind of get an overview of what you're arguing.
Yes, and I'll piggyback off of that. In the law, it depends on what your audience. So for example, in No Fault, it was more of a narrative because you're dealing with individuals on a certain level. You're dealing with actual, lay people. We call them lay people in law, regular civilians. So you want to tell the story about, how the accident has affected their life and so forth. But in commercial litigation, what you want to do? Okay, I see the breakout rooms. Sorry. And in commercial litigation, what you want to do is be concise. We do that IREC method in law school, issue, rule, analysis, conclusion, straight out the gate.
So thank you very much for coming. Presenters, if you want to stay back just for a minute so we can thank you in person again. Right? And students and all faculty, thank you very much for coming. Have a great night.